Good morning. All right, so going back over our different variables, remember it's really important when we are looking at the scientific method in order to create a valid experiment, we can only change one variable, okay? And that one variable that we are going to change is the independent variable. Remember, the independent variable is what you believe as a scientist to have the greatest impact on the outcome. So for example, if we were talking about those plants again, if I believe that plants grow the best with more water, then that would be the one thing I would change. During the experiment, I would keep all other factors that have known impacts like soil type, amount of sunlight, fertilizer. I would have to keep those the same so that those cannot interfere with my experimental results. So those are called the controls. The dependent variable then is what I would be measuring. So the one thing that I want to see the outcome. Is it taller? Does it have greater flowers? Does it produce more fruit, etc.? It could be any of those things. So on the first one, it says, you wonder if the speed of a car as it travels down a hill has anything to do with the mass. So that pondering would be considered our question or problem, what we actually want to solve. So you set up an experiment. You find a hill in front of your house, obtain a large toy car from your little sister and some sand. The toy car does 4 different time trials. The first with no sand, the second with 1 cup, the third with 2 cups, and the fourth with 3 cups. The time is measured and the speed is calculated as a result of the experiment. So the one thing that we changed, the one thing that was changed in this experiment, the independent variable, was the amount of sand. So I know a lot of my classes, when we said amount of sand, okay, really the amount of sand causes a change in the object's mass. Hopefully you guys were thinking mass. So really our independent variable is the mass of the car. Now the dependent variable is what we are going to measure. So again, my group, we were talking and a lot of people pointed out that we are measuring the time. But really we're using that time to calculate the speed of the car. And if we go back, it says she ponders and wonders, right here, let me point it out for you. She wonders if the speed of the hill has to do anything with the mass of the car. Okay, so that's her question. So you know that the independent and dependent variables should be in there at some point. All right, things we kept the same. It was the same hill. It was the same car. It is the same timer. It has the same environmental conditions, which just means one day it can't be wet, and the other day it can be dry. One day windy, one day not windy. It all has to be the same. So she did the 4 time trials on the same day. All right, and then also if you want to include that we put the same type of sand in each car, you could do that as well. Okay? All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, you add the same amount of salt to 3 different 500 milliliter containers. You don't stir one at all. You stir the second one super slow, and the third one you stir normal, and then the fourth you stir vigorously. Okay? All containers are stirred in the same manner in the time period. The time it takes for the salt to dissolve completely is measured. Okay, so what is changing here, which is my independent variable, is the stirring type. So that stirring type would be whether you're going to stir it at all, maybe you're going to stir it regularly or really vigorously, which just means you're going to stir it really, really fast. The dependent variable, which we are going to measure then, is going to be the time that it takes for the salts to dissolve. All right, control variables. It's the same amount of salt. It is all in the same type of container, so all 500 milliliters containers. We have the same amount of water. We can't change that, that wouldn't be fair. We stir it for the same amount of time. Okay, so all of those, and also it's you, right? Same person is storing it the whole time. All right, so all of those would be what we would consider to be the control variables. Those are the things that are kept the same. All right, number 3, you wonder, does heating water allow it to dissolve more sugar? Temperature is measured after every minute for 5 minutes. The amount of sugar is measured in grams and is kept constant throughout the experiment. All right, so on this one, what we are going to be changing is the temperature of the water. So our independent variable is the temperature of the water. That temperature is going to continue to increase over the period of 5 minutes, right? Because we're going to allow it to keep heating up, get hotter and hotter and hotter. The dependent variable, which we are going to be measuring, is going to be the amount of sugar left. Okay, controlled variables. We are keeping it in the same pot. We are using the same stove. We are measuring every minute, right? So the time increments are the same. We are going to start with the same amount of sugar. So that's the starting amount is going to be the same. All right, let's look at number 4. A scientist measures how far a particle travels within a given amount of time. Every second she measures how far it has gone and creates a graph of her results. What is the independent variable in this experiment? So this one, it's a little bit easier to identify the dependent variable. So what they're going to measure is how far the object has gone, how far the particle travels. So our dependent is the distance the particle travels. All right, so things that are kept the same, we have the same particle. We have the same medium through which it's traveling. Okay. All right, so when we look at this then, we say, okay, what is the independent variable? It's not as explicit as the other ones in terms of what is different. So when you ask yourself, well, what is different in this experiment? It's the time, right? So for our independent variable, it's actually the time that she let the particle go. So for example, the first trial, she would probably let the particle go for 1 second. See how far it goes. Then the next trial, she'll let it go for 2 seconds and then 3 seconds. So the amount of time that she lets the particle actually just travel is what our independent variable would be in this one. So this one's a little bit harder, but that's what you would get for this one. All right, so you want to know if stirring water as salt is added will increase the rate at which the salt dissolves. To test this, you place the same amount of salt in each container. So you see how it says same amount of salt? Anytime you see the word same, that goes with my control. So the amount of salt. Okay. In 1 cup, you do nothing. In the second cup, you stir slowly. And in the third cup, you stir a little bit more quickly. In the last cup, you stir it vigorously. So independent variable, again, what we're changing is how quickly or how slowly we actually stir the mixture. So this is very similar to the one earlier that we saw. Dependent variable, again, then we would go ahead and measure the rate of the salt actually dissolving. Now, it doesn't specifically say this, but we would want to make sure that the amount of water would also be the same. We would want to make sure what we're using to actually stir is the same, so the stirring rod, and then making sure that the actual cups are the same size as well. So with the scientific method, remember the most important thing is that we come up with a question or a problem that we want to solve. We're going to do a little bit of background research to help give us a clearer picture as to historically what has been done about that problem, and then come up with a hypothesis. Remember, our hypothesis is going to be an if-then statement, and that if-then statement will kind of help drive our experiment. Then we're going to go ahead and test our experiment and make sure that we have a procedure that is well written out, that is extremely specific, almost painfully specific. Then, if our procedure is working, then we can continue to analyze and draw some conclusions. If it supports our hypothesis, then we can go ahead and communicate our results. If it does not, we may need to go ahead and actually restructure our hypothesis or recreate our procedure, retest it, and then again, see if our data and our results support our hypothesis or not. So what you guys are going to be doing for the last part of this assignment is we want you to actually go ahead and determine what could be a possible solution to a problem, right? So as you guys are actually doing this, I want you to consider, well, what are you going to change in your experiment? What is the one single independent variable that you want to change? This should have the greatest impact on your desired result. Okay, so that would be what you're going to measure with that dependent variable. So I want you to start thinking about a problem or observation or anything like that you have seen, interpreted, noticed, and see if you want to find a way to solve that problem. So what you're going to do is come up with a way to go ahead and state your problem, come up with a hypothesis. Remember that hypothesis should be written as an if-then statement. And then I want you to design a procedure. Okay, how are you actually going to test out your possible solution to the problem that you have identified? Okay. Once you guys do that, you guys are going to submit this all back to me, okay? All right. You guys have a great Monday. Talk to you later. Bye.